Welcome to Family Court Conversation by Everyman Justice. I'm McKenzie Friend, a McKenzie Friend supporting people in the family court across England and Wales. In this episode, I'm speaking with Amanda from Family Court McKenzie Friend Kent and London. We talk about domestic abuse, coercive control, children, risk, protective orders, and the role of McKenzie Friend can play when these issues appear in the family court. This is a general discussion only, it is not legal advice, and we are not discussing any live case or named family. If you are in immediate danger, call 999. If you are unsure about your own situation, please seek proper legal advice or specialist domestic abuse support. Amanda, thank you very much for joining me on Family Court Conversation. I'm really pleased to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Before we talk about the court side, can you tell us a little bit about your background, the kind of work you have done supporting people affected by domestic abuse?
Yeah, so my background started within the health and social care side of things, which turned into me learning more about domestic abuse. So I've been in the domestic abuse world for over 23 years now. I'm qualified as an IDVA, which is an independent domestic violence advisor. I also co-wrote a domestic abuse project or programme that is now facilitated throughout the whole of Kent called the Phoenix Programme. My background also is I was a special constable within Kent Police. I worked for victim support in London as a senior IDVA. More recently, the Family Drug and Alcohol Court, which is part of social services, supporting those going through the family court. And I've also run a domestic abuse charity, which is gender inclusive, because we know that domestic abuse can happen to anybody regardless of their gender.
You have worked so many different support roles. What did those roles teach you about people going through crisis?
Everyone is different. Everyone deals with crisis in a different way. Some go into panic mode, some go into practical mode. It definitely affects their mental health. Their whole world has been turned upside down. Lots of things have been happening and they don't really know which direction to go in. I quite often hear people saying, "Oh, I've not suffered domestic abuse. He's never hit me," or things, or words like "only." Well, it was only a push. If I hadn't done something wrong, then he wouldn't have done it. It was never domestic abuse because he never hit me. Also, then, when you're in the family courts, lots of agencies get involved as well, because it's about safeguarding both the children and the families, the adults within that family.
So finally, what led you to become a McKenzie Friend as well?
So, after many years of working in the family courts and seeing the high bills that the clients were paying for solicitors, some going into like the £30,000, I just felt it was so unfair that people that really needed that help had to pay such high fees. And there were also people that just couldn't afford it. Parents that had separated from their children but couldn't afford to apply to the courts. So I did my research. I joined separated parents on Facebook pages. I spoke to other McKenzie Friends, including yourself, and then decided I was going to do some research about what training I could do, and decided that I was going to start my training. Although I know lots about applications in the court, I felt like I really needed that qualification to strengthen my business plan on top of the other training that I've done.
You have a very interesting background. Let's dive in now a bit more difficult questions. For anyone who is not familiar with the system, how would you explain the difference between criminal and family court?
So criminal courts deal with crimes, whilst the family courts deal with the private disputes within the families. So within the criminal courts, the standard of proof is very high, so something that's happened has to have happened beyond reasonable doubt. So the goal is to find out if that person is guilty of a crime or not, and decide what that punishment's going to be. Family court is about the families that are unable to make decisions together due to divorce, maybe child arrangements, finances, and obviously domestic abuse. So it's normally one parent will be taking the other parent to court because they can't agree on something after separation, or they requesting an order to protect them from harm. So the proof is different, or the evidence is different. It's usually based on the balance of probability. So the outcome that the courts want is to resolve a personal or family dispute.
These differences matter because many parents don't understand why the same situation can involve more than one court system. How would you describe domestic abuse to someone who does not fully understand what it means?
Yeah, so there's a newish, in 2021, there's a Domestic Abuse Act which sets out what domestic abuse is. So it is about the behaviour of two people, over the age of 16, that are personally connected. So personally connected means that they're a partner, it might be a husband or wife, relatives, or a family member, or somebody with shared parental responsibility for a child. The abusive behaviour comes in so many different ways. It can be physical or sexual abuse. It could be violence or even threats of violence. Coercive control, where you're isolating someone, monitoring them, checking their phones, wanting to know where they are all the time. Then you have emotional or psychological abuse, where they're intimidated, manipulated to do things that they're not really comfortable doing. We've also got economical abuse, where someone is controlling the finances, maybe stopping you working or making you work all the time. But domestic abuse is all about the power and control over another person.
If someone is abusive to their partner but not directly to the children, can that still affect the children?
Yes, definitely. Again, the Domestic Abuse Act 2021, children for the first time are recognised in their own right as being victims of domestic abuse. Children hear and see things, they experience the effects of domestic abuse has on that household. Even if they weren't there, when they come back into the family home, they will feel that tension between the parents. Children are hugely affected by domestic abuse.
Yes. What kind of impact can children experience when they witness abuse or live around controlling behaviour?
So even before the child's born in the womb, they can be affected. You know, they feel mum's emotions, her feelings, they can hear noises, they can hear shouting. And then when the children are born, they're not programmed, this is what your life's going to be like, you know, you can have a great life or a bad life. They learn from those people that are closest to them. So if they're in that abusive home where they're seeing domestic abuse, they're seeing their parents screaming and shouting at each other, there may be violence, then they think that's normal. That's what every other child is experiencing. And that's where it's really sad. The children can start becoming disrespectful towards their parents, and they believe that that's how you treat people. And then when they grow up, they can grow up to have poor relationships in the future. They may also become abusive themselves, or go into abusive relationships because that's normal to them. They can become quite fearful, they can feel divided between parents, and obviously all this impacts their self-esteem, their confidence, attachment issues. You know, it's so important when you do have children within the home to reach out to professionals to get that help. Schools is always a good starting point where they can get that support in place for your child.
Yes, it's very important to protect the children from domestic abuse experience. You are trained in DASH risk assessment. For someone who has never heard of it, what is DASH and why can risk assessment matter in the family-related cases?
Yep, so DASH is a risk assessment. It stands for Domestic Abuse, Stalking and Harassment, and it was developed by Safe Lives. The risk assessment is used by professionals to identify the risk. So they ask you questions, and some of them aren't nice, they're quite uncomfortable to answer. But it's really important to be truthful to see what risk you are at. It's then assessed at either standard, medium or high risk. If it does come out at high risk, it goes to a meeting called a MARAC, which is a multi-agency risk assessment conference, where agencies such as the police, social services, health, domestic abuse services will sit down and discuss what could be put in place for that person to protect them from further harm and to lower the risk. And within family law, obviously identifying a risk means that we can then look at protective orders to protect them, such as a non-molestation order.
So it's a working system for protect the people. What is the one of the biggest misconceptions people have about domestic abuse?
Okay, I think it's knowing what domestic abuse is. A lot of people still think that domestic abuse is violence, it's hitting, and domestic abuse comes in so many different forms, like we spoke about already. Domestic abuse is about the power and control over another person. It doesn't have to be violence.
A lot of these issues become even more complicated when they reach the family court, because the court has to look at the safety, evidence, contact and the child welfare at the same time. Domestic abuse can involve both criminal issues and family court issues. Why might something end up being dealt with the family court even when there are serious concerns?
Yeah, so like I said, there's two issues there. You've got the criminal side, which is looking at the violence and the coercive control, which will be dealt with by police and the CPS. And then if the alleged perpetrator then decides that they want to apply to the court for contact, the criminal issues will be brought up. And that's normally by Cafcass or social workers that will look into it a bit deeper, because it's about safeguarding concerns. If that person wants to have contact with their child, they need to make sure that's safe. Also, they will look to see if there's any violence, if there's any ongoing police investigations, any protective orders such as a non-molestation order that's been there to protect them from further harm already.
In family court, there are now protections around questioning alleged victims directly. In general terms, how can the court try to make the process safer or less traumatic for people giving evidence?
So again, the Domestic Abuse Act 2021 is there to help. So like you said, no longer are the alleged abusers able to question their victim or cross-examine them at all. If it does come to the point where there does need to be those questions, a legal advisor would be appointed to do that for them. We also have other special measures in place to support victims. So things such as screens can be put up within the court, separate waiting areas, support from people such as us as McKenzie Friends, and also remote hearings. I'm hearing a lot more now that they're bringing the remote hearings in place, because that person doesn't have to feel intimidated or worried about bumping into them in the car park. So it's safe for all. So there are measures that can be put in place to protect that person.
People often mix up non-molestation order and occupation order. Can you explain the difference in simple terms and when each one might become up?
Yeah. So a non-molestation order is a protective order to protect someone from further harm. So it's about stopping the other person from abusing them, harassing them, threatening them. This is under the Family Law Act 1996. So they will put restrictions in for the other person not to come within maybe a certain distance, not to contact them, not to harm, distress the other person, or get anybody else to do that for them. The judge will also put in a power of arrest attached to that. So if it is breached, it's so important to contact the police, show them the order that you have. So this can be applied for quite quickly after an incident because it is a protective order to stop it happening again. Normally will last between 6 and 12 months, but it can go on for years in extreme cases or when there have been breaches. An occupation order is when the judge will make a decision who lives at the property. So if you both own or rent a property together, the judge will decide who has to leave. So they will look at safety, living arrangements, housing needs, the financial situation of you both, and if you have children. And these orders normally last for 6 months, and that gives you that space to make decisions and make those changes within your life.
For many people representing themselves, this is where support becomes really important. Not just legal information, but preparation, confidence, and understanding the process. How can a McKenzie friend support someone who is going through family court case involving domestic abuse concerns?
Yeah, so all McKenzie friends work differently. I think with my knowledge of domestic abuse and my background, it's not just looking at the case, but it's also looking at the risk. So a client may come to me looking for an application for a child arrangements order, and then as they're talking, disclose domestic abuse without really understanding what it's about. So then I can offer them other support services within their area for domestic abuse to help them understand what they've really been through and what's been happening in their world. We can also then advise them about thinking about protection orders such as a non-molestation order or occupation order, prohibited steps or special measures within the court to help keep them safe.
That distinction is really important. A McKenzie friend can help someone organize their thoughts, understand the process, and prepare for court. But in domestic abuse cases, they also need to recognize when specialist legal advice or domestic abuse support is needed. There are different professionals involved in these cases, and it can be very confusing. IDVA, social worker, Cafcass officer, can you explain what each one generally does and where a McKenzie friend fit alongside them?
Yeah, so courts, police and other professionals really like shortening words, and unless you're a professional you're not going to understand them. So ask, if people are talking to you about things and giving you these acronyms, ask them, what does that mean? I don't understand it. So an IDVA is an independent domestic violence advisor, or sometimes called an advocate. So they're independent of the police. They're normally from charities or commission services to support anybody affected by domestic abuse. A social worker is a professional from your local authority, so safeguarding children and vulnerable people. They may write assessments for the court, and they also coordinate meetings with other professionals, such as child in need or child protection meetings. And the Cafcass officer works for the court, so they will look at the best interest of the child. They're normally involved with the child arrangements orders and will write a report with recommendations to the judge. So as a McKenzie friend, we're not legally trained, so we don't have a lot to do with the professionals. But what we can do is guide our clients through the processes so that they understand what they're going through. Sometimes Cafcass will allow us to come into meetings and take notes for them, or it might be that our client is really struggling to draft an email or draft their statements, and they just don't know what the next sort of steps are going to be. So we're then able to sort of guide them through that process. Within the court itself, we are not allowed to speak as a McKenzie friend unless we are given permission by the judge to do so.
From your experience, what is the one thing a McKenzie friend should get right in this type of case, and one mistake they should avoid?
They've got to think about their own safety themselves. So when you're working with people that have been through domestic abuse, the perpetrators aren't going to be happy that you are supporting them, that you're empowering them. So when you attend courts, it's really important to think about where you're parking. Don't let them see where your car is. Keep a mobile phone on with you. Make sure somebody knows where you are and what time you're going to be home. Be really careful about not being followed. Also think about your own well-being. Some of these cases aren't very nice. Some of the things you have to hear can be quite worrying. So it's important to refer to other agencies if you have concerns, and look after yourself as well at the same time. Keep your boundaries strong with both parties, and it's about keeping your client safe as well. So don't act like a solicitor. Don't go and speak to the other party and start arguments and stuff like that, because that's not your role. You're there for your client, to support them for what they're going through. Keep them calm, because they're going to be, especially if they're attending court themselves in person, they've got 101 things that they want to tell you, and obviously it's about listening to what they've got to say. Domestic abuse is not a one-off incident. They've got lots of things to tell you. So I always sort of go back to them and say, right, write some bullet notes about dates and times when things have happened, so that we can look at the whole picture of what's been going on. I say it very much like a puzzle. So with domestic abuse, there's lots of things have gone on in lots of bits of this puzzle, but unless we put the whole puzzle together, we can't see the overall picture. So that's really important for them, and I think it's about them processing what they've been through at the same time as well. Don't influence them on what they're saying. They have to make their own decisions, and I always remind them that at any point they can go and speak to a lawyer or a solicitor or get some independent legal advice at any stage through that process.
I believe those information that you had just touched very important for new McKenzie Friends. Do McKenzie Friends and domestic abuse advisors ever work alongside each other?
The roles are very different, and I think it depends on the organisations. But I think it's important for us, especially when we're applying for non-molestation orders, to know what that risk is. And if you're not confident in doing the dash with the client, go to a domestic abuse service and ask them to do it. There is training around that, but it's important to look at the risk of what the client is going through. People get killed because of domestic abuse, so you don't want to put yourself in that position. You definitely don't want to put your client in that position as well. So work as much as you can with the other agencies that are out there, and like I said before, if you feel it's too much for you, then reach out to a domestic abuse service and get that support and advice from them.
Think about the wider system. It can sometimes feel like people only get help after things have already become very serious. If you could improve one thing about how the system supports people affected by domestic abuse in family proceedings, what would it be?
More training, I think, and I think we have got better. Over the past 20 years, we do talk about domestic abuse more. I think professionals still need to understand the effects it has on domestic abuse, and getting those words out to people that there is support out there, because quite often clients will say, perpetrators will say, oh, no one's going to believe you, I'm the one that works full time, I do this, I do that, I'm this amazing person. They're not going to believe you, but we will go out there and speak to people, and get the support that you need.
One thing that comes through very clearly from this conversation is that people need the right support at the right time. Not every problem is solved by one professional alone, and in family court is often matter who is around the person before the hearing, during the hearing, and afterward. If someone listening is going through something like similar right now, what is the one thing you would want them to know?
I think like I said before, that there is help out there. On the internet now, you can research domestic abuse. There's websites out there. I know Kent has a domestic abuse website where you can find out what agencies are out there, what professionals can help. If you can't afford solicitor, reach out to a professional McKenzie friend, look at their reviews, look at the qualifications that they have before you decide who that you're going to go with. And I think also costs are really important. Ask them how much is it going to cost you, so you're not sort of getting yourself into debt or anything. Both of us, I'm sure, if you reached out to us and we didn't cover your area, we'd be, quite happy to signpost you to McKenzie Friends that we trust, that can support you. And also at Family Court McKenzie Friend, we have a pool of professionals that I can call on at any time if you need advice, such as mediators that I've worked with before, independent social workers, counselling, will writers, contact centres, because what I like to do is have that wraparound service for anybody that's in the family court system. It's not just the court day, it's the effects it has afterwards and getting that right support out there for you.
Yes, you have to have the right team. Amanda, thank you again for joining me and sharing your experience. I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you to Amanda for sharing her experience and for giving such a practical perspective. You can find Amanda's contact details in the episode description and also on the Everyman Justice website. If you find this episode useful, please subscribe to Family Court Conversation, share it with someone who may need it, and visit Everyman Justice for more information about family court support. I'm Gergely Fried from Everyman Justice. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.